listening to the No Schedule Man podcast with Kevin Bulmer, exploring real stories and lessons learned with a variety of special guests. To learn more about Kevin and to access other episodes of the podcast, please visit noscheduleman.com and connect and contribute at NoScheduleMan on Twitter or Instagram and on Facebook, YouTube, and SoundCloud, all /NoScheduleMan. Thanks for listening and enjoy the No Schedule Man podcast.
I've been known to struggle with reality, not that it is any real mystery.
Hi, I'm Kevin Bulmer. Welcome to the podcast. Today's guest is Cole Pearn. NASCAR fans are going to recognize Cole's name as the crew chief for the Furniture Row Racing Team and driver Martin Truex Jr. in the Monster Energy NASCAR Cup Series. Cole's story is a terrific example of knowing yourself, trusting your gut, and going with what feels right to you. Now, I first got to know Cole when he was a teenager, racing not only at Delaware Speedway here in Ontario, Canada, but what they used to call the CASCAR Super Series, which later became NASCAR's Canadian Tire Series and now the NASCAR Pinty Series. Well, back at that time when Cole was a teenager, he was regarded as one of the true up-and-coming talents in Canadian racing. That would have been around 1999, 2000, 2001, somewhere around there. Cole continued to race through the balance of his high school days and into and through his time at university. And as you'll hear, he juggled both racing and post-secondary education and did a real good job of both. Next came a job at Toyota. Beyond that, I don't think I should tell you a whole lot more because Cole is going to go over the rest of the story in his own words in this conversation, which you're going to hear in just a couple of moments. But fast forward to now, where Cole, as I mentioned, is the crew chief, sitting atop the pit box for Furniture Row Racing at NASCAR's top level, working with driver Martin Truex Jr., who was named NASCAR.com's Driver of the Year after the 2016 season. Now, Cole started as crew chief going into the 2015 season, and the team won its first race at Pocono in Pennsylvania that year. The next season, the one that we just finished at the time of this recording, they finished second in what was the closest finish in the history of the Daytona 500. And though that win got away, they went on to grab 4 checkered flags in 2016 at Charlotte, Darlington, Chicagoland, and at Dover. Now, I fully anticipate there are going to be some people who are loyal fans of Cole and Martin Truex Jr. who might want to listen to this and hear from their crew chief. And I hope you enjoyed the story. I do feel it's important, though, to point out that this podcast is about personal development, and more specifically toward featuring different guests and allowing them a platform to discuss their journey and what they learned along the way. So while we do talk some racing, of course, we don't go very deep into the details of it. This discussion is much more about Cole's journey than, say, what setup they used at Charlotte. Now, since I've had a racing background, I used to manage the stock car track where Cole raced, so he and I are friends. We've known each other a long, long time. I would love to have the opportunity to really dive deep into just one specific race and pull Cole's decisions apart and ask him about that, set up on the car, some of the run-ins that he's had with NASCAR. But I don't want to lose the people that listen to this podcast for the personal development stories, so I kept that in mind. I also want to keep in mind the people that are deep into NASCAR and know all the granular stuff about racing and try to give you a perspective of Cole's journey with enough of the racing stuff in there. So hopefully you enjoy it. I also had all of the wonderful people that I ever met or worked with in my time at Delaware Speedway and around CASCAR and other related racing series and tracks in mind when I was talking to Cole, because I know there are a lot of people in this country, Canada, that are going to want to hear more about his story and how exactly he ended up going from a little town like Mount Bridges and racing at a little half-mile stock car track in Delaware, Ontario, Canada, up to the top of the pit box at NASCAR's highest level, and you're going to hear exactly how he did that. Cole's is a fascinating story and a great example to the rest of us, regardless of what your interest is or what you might want to do, of how important it is to really know yourself, to understand what it is that's important to you and what can happen when you take action to pursue it. Some of the things that really stood out to me to listen for that I learned from Cole: number one, go with your gut. Trust your intuition. We have so many people, in my view, that are just following along for the sake of following along. But if you know what really resonates with you and you go with your gut and you trust it, you're not afraid to take a risk. Boy, you need to know how to do that when you're the crew chief of a NASCAR team. Number two, run your own race. And to do this, You've got to really know yourself and what's important to you. Plus, you're also going to hear where Cole talks about some of the things that were important to him, like where he lived as opposed to the operation of the race team, why he ended up going to Denver and Furniture Row Racing as opposed to staying in North Carolina, or what his feelings were about North Carolina to begin with. Well, had Cole not specifically known what was important to him, he might not ever have ended up in Denver to begin with, and he may never have worked with Martin Truex Jr. You never know. You'll also hear him talk about how he had plenty of opportunities to go somewhere else and didn't, and just understanding how to keep taking that next step in the series of decisions like leaving his job at Toyota, why he decided to go with the Childress Racing team as opposed to the Evernhand team that first opened their door to him, going to Denver as opposed to staying in North Carolina, staying at Furniture Row Racing versus leaving, running your own race. Good stuff. And third, pursuit. We'll call it action. Once you know who you are and what you want, then you've got to go after it. So the examples are the same as what I just mentioned. All those series of decisions, he made the decisions, but that wouldn't amount to anything if you didn't act on it, if you didn't pack everything up and go down to North Carolina, if you didn't knock on doors, if you didn't know which job to take, if you didn't know when not to do something by just trusting your gut and taking the action. Once you have that picture in your mind of what you really want, you've got to pursue it. If you don't try, you'll never know. Well, Cole can look back and be really proud. I want to thank Cole for his time, and I hope that you enjoy the conversation. Here's the chat with Cole Pearn on the No Schedule Man podcast. Cole, I'd like to start off with a little word association. I'm going to throw a word or a phrase at you, and then just tell me whatever comes to mind. It doesn't have to be one word. You can talk for an hour if you want, but whatever comes to mind. You game for that?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, here's the first one. Peaches.
That's what I have my dad's name listed as my phone. So every time he calls, I got a picture of him from back in the day, and I guess that's probably what that'd bring me back to.
How did your dad acquire that name?
I think, yeah, back in the day, our house was next door to Kamoka Machine in Kamoka, and I think he was going into the shop over there for something, and somebody said it, and it stuck, and that's pretty much kind of where it went from there, I think.
We're going to come back to him, I'm betting, in a few different times in this conversation. We'll see how it goes. Well, let me throw a couple other phrases at you and see what immediately comes to mind. Kubota.
Yeah, I mean, Kubota was a great sponsor. Really kind of got my racing off the ground as far as stock cars goes. So I'm, still friends with a lot of those guys that work there, and just made a lot of great relationships. They're just really, really good people.
For whatever reason, I have the memories of those little folding chairs that they gave away as giveaways. You remember those?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I remember that.
I wonder if somebody would ever bring one to a NASCAR track and get you to sign one. That'd be an interesting collectible.
Yeah, I've forgotten about those. That's right.
Yeah, that actually came up in an earlier episode of the podcast when Derek Botten and I chatted, and he mentioned that. And I for some reason, I thought I still had one. But anyway, I'm off the beaten track. What about this one? What about if I mention the word CASCAR? What comes to mind?
Yeah, I mean, I still think that's still what I call it half the time. I'm not used to saying NASCAR Canadian Tire or Pinty's or whatever. It's still CASCAR in my mind. It's still the same people and same family. And, I was really lucky. I think Tony Novotny too. And I got to see him and Linda at Homestead this year, which was really random. I came out the back of the hauler, and I didn't think he'd aged a day, and since the last time I saw him, which it had to be over 10 years maybe. So it was good to catch up with them, and I still look back as he was kind of involved really at when it was in its heyday for sure. Yeah,
well, motorsports is the industry to get into if you want to stay young and stress free, right?
I guess so. Somehow he's managed to do it.
It's like dipping into the fountain of youth. I didn't quite get that memo, but still had fun. Well, I'll throw one more at you, then we're going to get into some stories. What about Delaware?
It's that's home. I still consider that home. It's amazing how hard it is. Just that's one thing I kind of regret. I don't really feel like I ever get to get out there anymore. It's difficult on an off weekend to convince yourself to go to a racetrack that's 2,000 miles away. So it's, I still think of, a lot of days riding down the hill from Mount Bridges, Kamoka to go there on a Friday afternoon is still, that's, made a lot of mistakes there, and, great opportunity and place to learn. It's home for sure.
How do you view yourself as a person, both with everything that you've created and since enjoyed with your family and, of course, in your professional life, Cole, but comparing now to how you were in those early days when you were just starting into your racing career and who you were, what thoughts come to mind about how you would compare yourself now as opposed to who you were then?
I'd say that's probably fair of kind of everybody that goes through that, time period. You kind of grow up a bit, and you learn from your mistakes, and, really not much different as far as a person, just hopefully a better person. I think, you're just always trying to improve yourself and just be a better guy, and, be better to the ones around you. And, I think I know a lot more now as far as, obviously race car stuff and that whole world. I think, it's taken a long time to get there for sure, but I don't know. I hope that I hope to think that you're somewhat similar, but it's just time changes you, and it's it's just part of it.
Something else I want to get out of the way I have written down here. Can you tell me definitively how to pronounce your last name?
I say it both ways, so I'm probably as guilty as anybody.
I always thought Pearn. Am I wrong?
No, that's correct. But if I say Pearn, it'll get spelled correctly. So I'm half the time if I'm ordering a pizza or I'm doing something on the phone, I'll say Pearn, and so I'm probably guilty as anybody is starting it. The confusion of going it both ways. It's funny just coming back from Christmas. My all of my family on my dad's side gives me a hard time whether I've changed how they say their last name anymore. So they got to think now whether it's Pearn or Pearn more so than they did before.
Well, I laugh because I had the great privilege of watching you earlier in your racing career and announcing a number of races that you were a competitor, some of which you won. And do you remember the name Ron St. Clair?
Absolutely.
I remember having I remember having a conversation with him where he was adamant it's Pearn, not Pearn. And it's funny, those things that stick with you, but that's one of the things that, for whatever reason, just kind of got burned into my cell recognition. So when I hear Darrell Waltrip on the TV broadcast talking about Cole Pearn, for whatever reason, it just, it kind of jumps out at me. But you remember those days, huh?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, Ron, I remember Ron, he was the big voice of it all when I first got started.
Let's talk about some of those times. How did you initially get involved in racing to begin with?
Oh, obviously through my dad. I mean, he I don't know, as long as I can remember. I mean, he, obviously raced, kind of the stock car scene in Ontario when I was growing up. So I remember, whether it be Delaware or Flamborough, having to lay on the floorboard of the truck, sneak into the track, into the pits, and be told not to leave, or just kind of hang out and play with my toys or whatever while it was all going on. So I mean, that's really where it all started for me. And obviously we watched Winston Cup races on TV and stuff when you could get them. I don't remember if we had cable. I don't think we had cable at the time. So I mean, you kind of just wherever. I remember going to over our neighbors, the Lokers, a lot to watch. I think they had a satellite dish, so we got to see more races if we went over there. So I kind of remember watching those races in their basement, and, that's really where it all, kind of the interest all started.
You progressed through the ranks pretty quickly as far as stock car racing in Ontario and in Canada was concerned when you were still involved as a driver. When you were in the throes of that, how much were you thinking at that time that you were aspiring to have a career behind the wheel?
I don't know. I mean, I think, I hate to say it, but I think growing up in Canada, you got to be realistic about the chances. At that time, obviously the sport was in, a healthier state than what it is now. So I think, the opportunities were probably a little more prevalent than they are now. But, nonetheless, I still, I kind of always had that suspicion that it probably wouldn't work out. You look at the, just the dollar and cents of it, of what it would take to do it. So, you just try and do the best at the level you're at, and whatever, I kind of always just taken that approach in life in general, and you just kind of do the best you can do. And if it's meant to work out, and, the best shot you have is doing the best you can. So I think, I think on the driving side, I was pretty always realistic myself about what the opportunities would be. So it was just something I like doing, and obviously just kind of grown up doing, and it was a hard decision to give it up, but, the timing was right to do it.
Am I remembering correctly, Cole, that my recollection is that when you were in university at Waterloo here in Ontario, Canada, that you still competed some in racing during the summer. Am I remembering correctly?
Yeah, I'd say, almost the whole time I was in university, I still raced. So, that was always a challenge, especially during the summer when, it conflicted, but it was, something I was fortunate enough to work through, and, was able to do both at the same time. I think probably both suffered at times, but it was just the way it was.
So tell me as much as you can remember, Cole, about the process around that time in your life of deciding for sure that you were going to pursue a career in motorsports, but not necessarily being married to the idea of being a driver. What was going through your head at the time that you felt you were really kind of feeling sure of that decision?
I think the last year I was racing really kind of started to sink in. I was working at Toyota full time and racing late models, pretty heavy schedule, and just trying to do both and working all hours of the day. And, kind of, I think the light bulb went, this is really not very sustainable. So I kind of made up my mind. I was like, look, I want to stay involved in racing, and, I really don't know what's possible. So I, decided, luckily I was fortunate enough to know people, one of my good friends, Aaron Johnson, who was in my class at Waterloo. I got a job with RCR, and I went and met him at a race in Martinsville, I think. And, he was like, look, if you're going to do it, you gotta quit and move here. So I think I was supposed to go back to Japan that week, I think, for Toyota, and I went back that Monday and I quit and didn't have anything, and just kind of took it from there and decided to dive in with both feet. And I figured that was the only way I was going to be able to make it. Okay,
let's stick on that for a minute. Tell me more about that whole experience, if you would, Cole. When you say you didn't have anything other than, you had a job. It sounds like one that was going to send you back overseas. Mm-hmm. And you decided to just give that all up and move to another country. What were some of the things that you were grappling with emotionally at that time?
Yeah, obviously it was, a huge element of chance, but, I kind of been that way my whole life as far as, if you're going to do something, you do it, you do it full bore. So, that was the only way it was going to work. So I don't know, just kind of like ripping a Band-Aid off, just made my mind up. That's what I want to do. And, kind of wrestled it for a couple days and just decided to do it. So it was, I never knew really at all what I was in for, or what the path was going to take to make it work. I just knew that I had to be there, and, had to be on the ones pounding doors, that if something came up, you were ready to be there to jump on it. And that was the only way it was really going to work, So I think, just fortunate to be in a spot in my life where that was possible to do. And, really is, a decision that, put me on the path that I've been on now since, really.
Well, that's the one that so many we're finding through the course of the conversations with this podcast, Cole, never make or don't make until a lot later in life, to just know what they're about and what really feeds their passion, and then make the decision to jump and then figure it out as they go. And it sounds like you had the intelligence, emotionally and intellectually, to be able to recognize that was how it was going to go, or at the very least, it was unlikely to happen if you didn't ever at least make that jump and take the chance. How fair is that to say?
Yeah, definitely. I'd say more so the latter. I was like, I knew if I was ever going to do it, that's what it was going to take. So, and I didn't want to live the rest of my life, questioning whether I did it or not. So I think, those two things really coming together is what led me to make the decision.
Having made that decision, then, tell me what happened next after that, when you headed down to North Carolina to join your pal.
Yeah, I mean, I was fortunate, I got, Petey Shepard was living there at the time. I think he was doing his development deal with Roush, and he had extra room for me to stay. And, I kind of just beat doors down for a month and kind of, used every connection and person that I knew, definitely on the Canadian side. I mean, that's, every Canadian you could call on in the sport, I tried to use, and then just did the cold calling, going to shops. And I actually got hired at Evernham's first, and I remember coming home for Christmas, and that's what I was going back to start to do. And when I was home, I got a call from RCR that there was an opportunity there. So went back down, I thought that was a better spot to be, and decided to take that job, and quit the Evernham job before. I think I quit on the Friday and I was supposed to start on the Monday. So that was a little bit interesting time, but it worked out. And, I think it wasn't long before they went out of business. So that was one lucky decision for sure.
What were some of those conversations like, Cole, when you said you were beating down doors and cold calling? Can you tell me a little bit more about what was going on, what was said in some of those interactions?
Yeah, I mean, you never knew what was going to be possible, right? There were some opportunities that, probably would have been jobs, but maybe not the right path or whatever. It was just kind of, I got really fortunate. I think if I honestly had done it a year later, because I did it in 07, and then obviously the economy took the tanking approach in 2008, and then budgets got really, really tight, kind of NASCAR wise, and I know for sure I probably wouldn't have made it if I hadn't done it that year. So I got really lucky that way. It was just, I don't know. It was just, you never knew if it was going to work. Some days it seemed hopeless, but, it was just fortunate to keep on trying, and eventually it worked out.
But when you say keep on trying, was it literally a scenario? Like, did you put a resume together? Did you just walk in and talk to, people at the front desk or whomever you might be able to get in front of and say, here's who I am, I'm looking for an opportunity, here's my experience in racing? How did that go?
Yeah, obviously. I mean, really tried to call on somebody you knew, try and get it in somebody's hands that could at least get it in front of the right person. And, that got you ahead more than anything else. So I think, you definitely use all connections, but absolutely, you just dropped your resume off wherever. And I think at that time is still, still that way. I mean, I was fortunate to having a, engineering back, being an engineer and growing up in racing. And those are two good combinations for sure. So, still to this day, I look at, I'd say most race engineers and, people in racing definitely have some level of race experience, in combination with their engineering background to be successful. It's definitely still the blueprint. So, those people, at least you're in the right type of demand. But again, it's just about timing and having the right spot, to be able to do it.
How long did it take from the time that you first went down there before you hooked on with that initial role at RCR?
Maybe a month and a half, maybe, I'd say. Yeah, about that time. I think it was a month before I got the Evernham job, and then maybe it was a week or two after that the RCR thing worked out. So not too long when you think about it in the grand scheme of things, but, it sure felt like a long time, a lot of long days of time.
I was just going to say, I bet 4 to 6 weeks feels like plenty when the phone's not ringing back and you're not getting any yeses to any questions that you're asking. But from the time that you hooked on with Childress then, what was that like, and what were some of the things that happened initially?
Just really like kind of drinking from a fire hose in a way, just trying to soak it all in. I mean, it was a lot to take in. It was a whole different world. I mean, I came from Toyota, which was, pretty rigid and very structured, and, and then going to a race team that was kind of loose and fluent and not really the most organized at times, but at the same time, just, in the mode where everything had to get done, 5 minutes ago. So it was, it was unbelievable, kind of a great situation to learn in. I was lucky I made some, really good friends, right off the bat that kind of helped take me under their wing and, point me in the right direction, and, made sure I, fell in with the right crowd and learned the right way. And, just would let you ask the stupid questions when you needed to ask the stupid question just to make sure you understood. And, just really tried to work every hour of every day just to, make the most of it. And, it was a great learning opportunity, and, one I'm, really forever thankful for.
What were some of the things you were responsible for initially, Cole?
I started doing like all the data acquisition on 29, and then going to all the tests, handling the data, and then just kind of worked forward from there. I mean, got where I was handling, just trying to fill in any hole I could, and got where I started doing a lot of the 7-post testing. And that time it was just when the car tomorrow came out, so bump stop development was going on. So really there was nobody really working on that full time, so I dug myself into that, and shock stuff, and just tried to find a niche. And I'd say it was maybe 4 or 5 months in, I was I made myself valuable enough that they started taking me on the road full time, and made me a full race engineer as it went.
How did it develop then to get you over to Furniture Row?
It was 2 years later, I think. 2 years later, so the beginning of 2010. That was the time that I signed RCR and Furniture Row signed a technical agreement, and that was kind of an interesting time. We wasn't really happy living in North Carolina 2 years down the road, so my wife and I were not sure what we wanted to do, and then this kind of opportunity fell in our lap. And then Regan Smith was driving here at the time, and him and I had grown up racing go-karts together. And then another guy, Ryan Conium, who people in Ontario world would know, was working here as well, and just kind of all fell together. To have opportunity to come out here, and I still remember coming out here the first day, and I walked through the shop. I landed in the morning and came to the shop and spent the afternoon here, and I called my wife, girlfriend at the time, and said, "There ain't no freaking way I'm going to work here. This is the biggest bunch of junk I've ever seen in my life." So then I went downtown Denver that night, and I loved the city, and I was like, well, maybe we can make this work. So we made the call and made the move.
I've read where you've been quoted as saying that living in North Carolina wasn't quite your favorite. More specifically, I read a quote where you said that it felt like going back in time. Well, so that's interesting. Do you see how there's a bit of an irony where the lifestyle for you, it seemed like, wasn't as appealing in North Carolina, but the way that the race team operated was a little bit more state-of-the-art. And I'm putting words in your mouth here, Cole, so jump in and stop me if I'm wrong. But compared to the rest of what you were seeing, maybe it was considered a little bit more state-of-the-art. Yet what I'm hearing is that when you went to Furniture Row, you didn't think at all that the race team operation was state-of-the-art, but you loved the lifestyle. Does that sum it up all right?
That's exactly it. Yeah, pretty much it. Yeah. They kind of sold me on the chance that the opportunity would be to get better here and, have a part in it. So I think that's how I at least, coaxed myself into doing it or rationalizing it. I think, it was tough that first year was tough out here. I mean, it kind of came, where you had a shot to, run good every week to now where you could get a top 20. It was, it was a good day. So that was a big mental challenge for sure.
For people that are listening to this, Cole, that don't have the context of NASCAR or you understand about how things are so centered in North Carolina, can you talk a little bit about how different it is maybe to be centered in Denver, Colorado, and why it is that way for that team?
It's different. I mean, everybody's kind of, within an hour of each other in North Carolina. So, I mean, people move around and, things are set up that way. NASCAR's R&D centers there. I mean, there's, most of the engine builders, now outside of TRD being in California, but, the rest of them are there. Kind of all the support network that you need to race is, kind of all there. So being out here was, definitely different. But I think, I think it was even more so different then. Now I think, you look at things being the global economy and, you look at companies like Amazon where you shop online and it comes to your next door. And that's kind of, that whole world in kind of scenario is the way we live. We ship stuff a lot, and it's just become our way of life.
All the race cars and all the equipment is centered out of Denver, though?
Yeah, our chassis, obviously, with our partnership with Joe Gibbs Racing, all our chassis are built there, and we hang most of the bodies here. I'd say all of them now. We have our machine shop here, so we do as much machine work as possible here locally. But still a ton comes from North Carolina, no doubt. All our gears and transmissions come from North Carolina. Drivelines there. I mean, obviously our relationship with Gibbs, everything's there. Really the engines come from California now, which is nicer in a way. For the most part, we just we build and assemble them here from the chassis up, I guess, is kind of the way it goes.
I guess I'm thinking more from the standpoint of just getting to the different racetracks to begin with, Cole, but I suppose that it's evolved to where it's not just an East Coast or Southern thing anymore. You're really having to get all over the continent, aren't you?
Yeah, it hurts us time in the shop, probably, compared to an East Coast team. We we definitely have more days on the road. So, but we just kind of built our schedule around it, and that's just how it works. And, now it's just kind of the way life is. I mean, it's obviously nice when we do have a West Coast race because we can load a day later typically, but, in some ways we don't end up doing that. Typically we just load the same time anyways, just because, it just screws you up for that next week, if you're dragging your feet. So it's just kind of how it works. And, we've just gotten used to it, and it runs pretty efficiently, I'd say.
Well, it's showing in the results, and we're going to get there. But before we do, let's pick up the timeline where we were, around about 2010, where you've made the transition and you've decided to accept that opportunity to go to Denver and Furniture Row Racing. What were some of the things that went on in the evolution between then and 2014 as that whole team evolved in your role with it? What do you remember about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think the good thing was, it's funny how it works out. We obviously took a drop in performance in terms of where I was at, but going to a small team enabled me to learn a lot more. I got my fingers into way more places, and got experience with pretty much everything, bumper to bumper, that you don't necessarily get when you're at a big team. So I think I think that was the coolest part of it. I got kind of force-fed training in a way, as far as having to learn everything. So I think having to do that and having a say in it, we were kind of able to start picking the performance up and go in the right direction. So I think really for me, that's I credit that time a lot, and what prepared me to be able to be moving to a crew chief role, just because I got to experience so much more of the full car that you don't typically get like when you are at a big team.
What was going on then, Cole, around the time of the crew chief switch? What led up to it, and what did your life look like sort of before and immediately after that?
That was a crazy time. I mean, really, Kurt and I had a great relationship back in 2013, and he really tried to pull me to go to Stewart Haas, to be a crew chief there. One that came to be really kind of a hard opportunity to turn down at the time, just to stay being an engineer here. But I had a lot of great relationships with people here, and I think 2014 was a challenging year. We kind of struggled with the first year with Martin, and a lot of us were questioning whether we had made the right call to stay, and a lot of other opportunities came about. I mean, that was a crazy year. I think I can't count the number of good job opportunities I had available. And likewise for a lot of the other key people that work here. And, we kind of, I remember one day just kind of all looked at each other and said, why do we want to go somewhere else? Why don't we just all commit to each other and decide to make this work? And, we decided to do that. Todd Berry at the time decided he didn't want to be crew chief anymore. So I was kind of the natural next one in line to do it. And Todd had basically trained me, from when I was wet behind the ears. So he, as far as anybody having influence in my career, it's probably him more than anybody. And he'd kind of known that time frame was, he wanted to be done being crew chief, and the plan was for me to take it over. So he kind of let me take more and more over the duties as we went. And like I said, when we all kind of looked at each other and said, why don't we just stay here and recommit ourselves to it, and let's make it work, and let's figure it out. And that's what we did. And then we really rolled into 2015 with kind of the end of 2014 we started to pick things up, and rolled into 2015 with a new approach, and came out of the box strong.
How did your world change on a day-to-day basis once you were put in the crew chief's role?
I'd say the people thing is probably the biggest thing that changed. When you're race engineering, you can kind of lock the door and go to work and pound away, and keep your mind in numbers and graphs and squiggly lines and try and make the car go faster. And when you become crew chief, it's really just the people side of it, dealing with all aspects of it, and making sure that everybody's working together the right way, and that we're handling things the right way as far as the car side goes, and how do we manage development, and how do we approach things, I guess, from the whole technical view. I mean, I think just the people side is really the biggest thing that changed. I mean, I find now crew chief days, I walk around the shop and all of a sudden it's 12 o'clock, and then all of a sudden it's 5 o'clock, and you're like, holy crap, where'd the day go? So it's definitely more of that style than just kind of being on your own, working away.
For somebody that doesn't understand racing or doesn't really know much about NASCAR, when we say crew chief, I've always kind of viewed it as, if you've got the driver, who is the one responsible for getting the car around the track, you may as well consider the crew chief pretty much the head coach or the manager of everything else that's going on. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's definitely, I think that's probably a fair assessment if you're going to compare it to anything else, for sure.
So how did you deal with that sudden onslaught of responsibility?
I don't know. I mean, you just kind of had to deal with it, right? I mean, it was just, it was welcomed. I think when you initially get into it, it's like, all right, cool. Let's do this way, and let's do that this way. And, just kind of pick away at what you think makes sense. And I'm just really fortunate to, have a lot of great people on our team. We got a lot of good people that we trust, and we all work well together. So, relying on those relationships when they come to you with hey, we need to do things this way, you listen and you do it. So I think, having good people around you, you really, feel the importance of that when you get in that role.
What's actually going on in your world, Cole, when you actually get to the racetrack? And I'm not talking about just race day, but when you arrive, and what's going on in your world almost right up until the checkered flag falls, and then after. Can you summarize that for us somewhat?
It's busy. I think obviously, there's managing the whole car side of things as far as inspection goes and all of that. And then, obviously between myself and the other engineers, digging through what we're going to do setup direction wise, typical weekend where, our team, we typically focus on qualifying on a Friday. So, we'll typically unload and qualifying trim, and, you get through initial inspection, and, you're kind of honing in on all the last minute details. I mean, things are always changing, rules are always changing, developments are always changing, approaches are changing. We're always trying to get better and react. So, I mean, it's never a dull moment as far as that goes. So, I mean, I'm really, like you said, the head coach on the side of it. So just being the link between, making sure what we want to do in the theoretical computer world is what's actually occurring on the car side and the real world, and really constantly being the link between the car and the garage and the guys working on it, and then on the engineering side. So it's and then dealing with the driver on the plus side of that. So it's busy. The race weekends are they're a busy time. Typically once qualifying gets done, then you're into race practice on the Saturdays, and then getting ready for race. I mean, I don't want to go into too detail on kind of how we do it on the technical side, but we kind of we run it from a pretty engineering driven system, and I think that's been a large part of our success.
We often here in southwestern Ontario, those of us that had anything to do with Delaware Speedway, we used to refer to it lovingly as sort of Canada's version of Daytona. Not trying to compare it in scope, but just in terms of the history of the sport in this country. So having gone from a place like Delaware, a little half-mile egg-shaped oval in southwestern Ontario, to now you're the crew chief, or if you like, the head coach of Furniture Row Racing, Martin Truex Jr. behind the wheel, and you arrive at the 2.5-mile super speedway at Daytona International Speedway in February of 2015. What was going through your mind and your guts at that time?
Just hoping we didn't look stupid. You dot your I's and cross your G's and you do everything right, but you don't know until you get there, right? So I think, I still remember that, that first weekend being like, oh man, what are we going to screw up? What are the things that we've kind of forgotten about or we missed? And, there was a couple things here and there, but, I think our first race, we went out in the Sprint Unlimited or whatever, Bud Shooter or whatever the heck it was called at the time, and ran well and led a bunch of laps and finished second. So it was like everyone just took a sigh of relief and said, all right, we can do this. If we stay focused on the things that we know are right and do our jobs, we can run well.
So not only did you run well there, but you finished in the top 10 and I think 14 of the first 15 races. Then you led the most laps at Kansas, but that got away. Then you were at Charlotte again at the Coca-Cola 600, led the most laps again there. You were knocking on the door so consistently, but the win wasn't coming together. What was going on in the team at that time?
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, you're kind of, we had consistency right out of the gate, but finally into that stretch, we'd showed the speed we needed to win. Which, on one side you're really excited because you're like, wow, we're doing the right things, we're going the right way. But then on the other side, you're disappointed because you haven't closed the deal. But I think it just shows you how hard it is to win these races. I mean, having a fast car is one thing, but man, it's so many other things have got to come together the right way, for it to work out.
What was it that was making the difference?
We just, kind of continued on the path we were on. I mean, we kind of started the year, and then we kind of had some tactical developments around the Kansas time where we had a new spec car come out that was a gain in performance, and we kind of just been doing the same things we'd been doing and getting better at it, getting more refined, and kind of that progression happened at the right time when we got a boost in performance, and really for us is that kind of pushed us over the edge at that time in the season.
How long did it take you to feel comfortable in the role of crew chief at the racetrack, Cole?
That wasn't too bad, really. I think, still just kind of getting used to it. I still think you get used to it, still getting used to it at times, because it's like, the game's always changing, I think is the hardest thing. But, I think just trying to make sure you communicated well. And, I think, 9 times out of 10, that's usually what breaks things down from the inside, is when communication breaks down. So just always trying to, make sure you're doing as best job as communicating as possible. And, I think having good people and keeping the communication strong, it's usually a good recipe for success. So, it's something you got to keep working at. It's not you just don't achieve it and it continues to maintain itself. It's a constant effort.
What do you consider to be the most challenging decisions that you have to make at the race while it's going on?
I don't know. I mean, it's always, I think it's definitely a challenge, when it comes race time, as far as pit calls and stuff like that go. There's so many split-second decisions you have to make, and circumstance A works out instead of circumstance B, you look like a genius, and if circumstance B works out, you look like a moron. So it's it's so hard. So many of these calls that you have to make. It's just kind of a crapshoot whether it's going to work out for you or not. There's so many opportunities to get burned. It's a tough world that way.
Well, and I'm thinking about things about 2 tires or 4, or gas or no gas, or stay out or come in, and now we're talking more racing terms and things like that. But how much do you have sort of formula, or for want of a much better word, Cole, in your mind? Like, if A happens, then we're probably going to do B, as opposed to is it more just going with your gut with what feels right at that exact moment?
Yeah, it's you definitely try and have as best educated guess you can, but it's difficult because a lot of it's kind of what happens afterwards. It might be a really smart call to short pit somebody, but then if the caution comes out and you get caught, then it's a horrible decision. So it's a lot of it's just kind of what happens after the fact, after you've made your decision. Sometimes you can stay out from pitting and you get 5 or 6 guys to stay with you, and it's a brilliant call, or nobody stays behind you, or you come in and pit and then 6 or 7 guys stayed out, and then all of a sudden you're buried in traffic. It's it's really difficult. You're trying to read what other teams are doing at the same time, but then on the flip side they're doing the same to you. So it's kind of random how it whether it works out one way or the not. Kind of every week. So it's you look at statistics and you study that stuff, but stats are stats. I mean, it's not a 100% guarantee that's going to go that way.
Well, most of us have work that we can do in terms of our decision making and what we worry about or the outcomes that we think may or may not happen just on a day-to-day basis. And just thinking about, our immediate managers and our coworkers and the people that we're reporting to, you have all that. But on the other hand, you've also got international television audiences and passionate fan bases scrutinizing every single decision that you and your peers make. How much do you allow yourself to be aware of that?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. My one of my good friends, he's not really a race fan. He's like, I kind of get it. I have a bad day at work or I make a mistake, and there may be 5 to 10 people that know about it, and when you screw up, it's a lot of people, that see your mistakes. So it's it's challenging that way, but I don't know. You just you take the good with the bad, and it's just part of it, right? I mean, you're going to be in that job. You're going to be, kind of under the microscope from fans and that side of it. So it's just, I don't know. It's just something you deal with, and you let it roll on.
Let's go to Pocono. Talk about Pocono in 2015, and ironically, the driver of the team that you hooked on with initially. Now, I guess in 2015, Harvick would have been with Stewart by that time, wasn't he?
Yeah.
But he was in the mix there for what became your first win, I think, near the end, was he not?
Yep. Yeah, you were in second that day.
So tell me a little bit about that first win at Pocono, how it developed and how that felt.
I don't know. I mean, we'd been really close the 3 weeks previous and not had it work out. So, we kind of made there was a couple actually good strategy calls we made in that race that worked out for us and, put us in position to be on the right tire cycle and the right track position at the end. And, we were able to make the most of it. So it was, it was a lot of fun. I think back at, going to victory lane there and stuff like that. And, we have a pretty young team, and I don't know, we had a blast. It was fun. We just, they said that was the first time ever that all the beer got drank in victory lane. They actually had to go get more beer because we were enjoying it that much. But it was, I think just seeing all the joy on everybody on our team's face, and, kind of everybody that, it all come from different paths and all worked their butts off to be where we were at as far as competition wise. And, to get to victory lane with that kind of group is, really special.
What were you hearing from your mom, your dad, some of the people around here that remember you from Delaware? You must have been inundated with texts and social media messages. And what were some of the things you were hearing at that time?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, people are mostly happy for you. So it's, that's a cool thing. I think the coolest thing is, you don't realize how many people are following it. People I thought, barely remember you or, don't, you wouldn't think be following the sport, that they reach out to you and congratulate you. That part's pretty cool, just, having that feeling. It's neat. I mean, that's, it's not something you get to do every day, and it's, a hard accomplishment to make it there. So, to have all those well wishes and, that amount of people be happy for you is, something really cool.
How much is Martin aware of the fact that he's been kind of adopted as Canada, or certainly much of Ontario's favorite son, or one of them anyway, because of the connection that he has with you?
Yeah, he knows, he recognizes it for sure. We definitely, I'd say we have more Canadian support than probably any other team, which is cool. I mean, there's a incredibly huge and loyal fan base there. So it's, he takes it all in. We get plenty of, joking back and forth between us. I don't hide it to people that I'm Canadian and proud of it. So they generally hear about it at some point.
What is it then about the relationship and the team aspect that you and Martin Truex Jr. enjoy that makes you so effective, Cole?
It's just, I don't know, it's just a really easy relationship. You're, kind of lower key, relaxed, but, determined people, and just, it just makes it really easy. I mean, I don't know. It's just, one that neither one of us have ever had to try to make work or be creative on, how to get to know each other better or whatever. It's just really been simple. And, I think, both of us, you've been on the downsides of your careers at points, and, we were fortunate, probably the worst points in our career were together. So it's just, to have the best part of your career and the worst part of your career with somebody, it gives you good trust in them.
Well, you had a really successful season in 2015, your first as a team there with Martin driving the car and you as the crew chief. You got that win at Pocono and you really turned things around. But I'm curious to know, going into the off-season between the 2015 season and the 2016 season, which felt heavier? The off-season prior to that, when things had not been going well and there was really only no way to go but up when you were made crew chief, or the one that followed it, Cole, when now you'd kind of turned the tide and you'd set the expectation that you were going to be able to be competitive, and you knew that you'd sort of set that bar and wanted to continue at that level and go beyond it? Which sort of weighed on you a little more?
I don't know. I mean, I kind of was probably more nervous, going from 2014 to 2015, but, really 2015 to 2016 was just so busy. I mean, I don't know how to describe it other than there's just complete chaos and, just unbelievably busy. I didn't know, a lot of days I was like, how in the world are we going to make it? Just because we basically, we had to start from scratch and then switch to Toyota and Gibbs. And, we'd raced JGR all the way to Homestead. So there was only so much we could really talk about as far as, what we needed parts wise and stuff. Cause, they couldn't tell us, and, we couldn't tell them what we needed. And it was just, kind of a weird scenario, but, we were just, I think, about flew to North Carolina every other week, through the whole off season, and just, it was a busy winter. But, one that the whole time you knew if we got this all together, I'm like, the whole time I'm like, man, if we get this all together, we're going to kill them. I saw the level of organization and, where they were at as a company. And then it was ironically enough where, our strengths really complemented, filled in the holes where they weren't necessarily as strong. So I was like, man, if this all comes together, this could be really special. So, I was fortunate to get out of the box strong, in 2016. That was, it was really a great year when you look back on it.
Let's talk about the first race of that year. How would you describe the very end of that year's Daytona 500?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the whole time I'm like, man, I just hope we ride it the whole way. If we finish second, this is great. For us, it was great. We hadn't really had much team. That was always the rub for us at Speedways. We always felt like we were on our own, and then to kind of have an organized attack of, 5 cars working together. I was like, man, this is the greatest thing ever, right?
Okay, let me
relax.
I'm deliberately jumping in. I'm going to stop you here because, again, I know I'm going to have a lot of people that follow your racing career want to listen to this, but also have a lot of people that follow the podcast in general that might not necessarily know what happened that day or what you're talking about being alone. So on the super speedways, when you've got to sort of have teammates out there to get the cars closed up and draft together, what does that mean for you and for Martin, as a more independent operation, to have to work? Because I'm thinking that there's got to be almost just as much work going on in the pits among the other crew chiefs, either before, during, or both of the race. I shouldn't necessarily say as what's going on in the track, but what does that mean for you as a crew chief to try to build those relationships so that it can translate to what happens with Martin behind the wheel?
Yeah, I mean, we never really, kind of in our previous to our Toyota life, we never really had anybody to work with or anything. We were kind of on our own and, did the best we could and ran well still. But we had RCR, but it was not, maybe not the most tight-knit organized attack that, what we had in February. It was kind of cool. We, obviously the detriment to any speed week is when you wreck in practice, because it pretty much kills your whole speedway plan. So, we decided the five Toyota cars all to practice together. And when we did, we noticed that our speed was, kind of pretty darn fast compared to the competition. And we, started to think about, well, hey, what if we all got lined up and, could we really control the race? So, that was the plan. And, we were fortunate to have it execute.
For those that haven't seen the end of that race, can you describe what happened?
Yeah, I mean, closest finish in Daytona 500 history, I think. So it was. What
was it?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of
a hundredth of a second,
something like that. I don't know, small. Yeah, but it might as well been 5 seconds when you don't win. So it was. Yeah, it was crime. I still remember going down the backstretch. After we'd taken the white flag and been like, man, I think we got a shot to finish second. This is gonna be great. Great start to the year and stuff. And then we the 20 moved up to block the 11 and 3 and 4, and we kind of had the bottom open up. And I was like, we came off with the lead. And at one point, I thought the 20 was going to cross up in front of the top line. And at that point, I'm like, holy crap, we might win this thing. And then, kind of when I saw the 11 had the outside run, I was like, I don't know. I kind of seen a lot of races there where the outside line kind of always gets the last little push to the line, and that's what happened. But still, it was close. Yeah, it was close. It was pretty wild ending for sure.
At a point like that for you in the role as crew chief, I'm trying to think of how to ask this. I want to say it must be almost sort of helpless, because at that point you've probably you put it in your driver's hands, and when you come down to the white flag, there's really not a whole lot left that you can do, is there? But watch and hope.
No, for sure. Yeah, you're watching just the same as anybody is at home watching. So it's it was just still. I mean, those races are so hard to be there, in that position. So still came away pretty proud. The fact that we ran as good as we did all day. Knowing the winner that we had and all the hard work and long hours that had gone into it, and then go and come within a foot of winning the Daytona 500 was a pretty awesome accomplishment. So I think that's kind of the mode and message we had to spin internally, and I think everybody was as much as you're disappointed about it, you're just still as excited about the effort nonetheless.
Well, you were able to carry that momentum forward. At Charlotte, what was it? Something like 390 something of the 400 laps that you led? You just annihilated the field and won that race. What was it that made you so dominant at Charlotte?
Honestly, I mean, we kind of, that had been a good track for us the last, previous year. Even in 2014, we struggled. We, for whatever reason, seemed to run pretty well there. So we qualified on the pole, which was huge. I think I go back to, there was a Kansas race maybe a couple weeks before that we had, got a lug nut hung behind the wheel on the last pit stop. And I really felt that race was probably our most dominant race of the year. I think us compared to the competition, we were, far ahead. Charlotte, we were really good in practice, and I was pretty confident, but you never know. And it was one of those nights where it all worked out. We pitted the right times, and, just kind of, we had a couple runs where we had gotten off a little bit. And then I think, the last run we were able to, get it fixed and get it right back in the right direction and drive away, for the win. But, it's just one of those nights, it's like, I think, the year before we were really just as good, and we had a, crazy caution scenario worked out where some guys were able to stretch it on fuel mileage and beat us. And, that just never happened. It just nothing really went wrong the whole night. And, we didn't beat ourselves, and, we were able to, when you got it done and you got the win, you look back and you're like, holy cow, that was was pretty unbelievable to have, that long a race and be in control of it the whole time.
It was a pretty incredible year. You went on to win some more times, Darlington, Chicagoland, Dover, that you grabbed checkered flags at all of those places. And I see NASCAR.com named Martin the driver of the year and gave you the nod of honorable mention for crew chief of the year. What does that feel like for you guys from where you started to reflecting back on accomplishments like that?
Yeah, and that's pretty cool for Martin, really. I mean, nice feather in the cap for sure. I mean, you think 2 years ago he could almost been out of a ride, or 3 years ago almost was out of a ride, completely out of sport, and then to be able to come back and run as good as he did all year. I think that's really the thing I look back on I'm most proud about is just I felt like every week we had a shot to win, and we had a lot of things go wrong on us this year. But again, it was they looked more more pronounced, I think, just because we were, in contention to win so many races. So I think, to go and be fast every week is definitely the goal. And then, we were really able to do that this season. I think that's the thing I'm proud of the most.
Cole, when I look at the top level of NASCAR from the outside in, it looks to me like an absolutely relentless, exhausting grind to be in the kind of prominent role that you're in. Is that true? I mean, I'm guessing that you've got almost very little downtime from the time that you're at Daytona to Homestead in November. It would look to me like you're probably at it pretty much 7 days a week. But how accurate is that? Yeah,
it's pretty trying. I mean, it's you don't really there's no real off days. Even if you take a day off and you don't come to work, I still find myself on my phone the whole day or on my computer at home. It's just it's a challenge, especially, if you want to do it the right way and, run well. It's just, it's about managing priorities too. I mean, you can work, make sure you're working, spending your time working on the right things and not getting drowned in the things that don't matter. Cause that's the thing that's easy to do. So, it's a challenge. There's no doubt about that. It's definitely a grind.
What's the cycle like, Cole, in terms of you're at a race on Sunday, and then you're back to the shop, and then you're turning around or back to wherever you are in Denver, and then getting to turn around and go into to the next race? How much are you home, and how far in advance do you go to the next race?
Yeah, I mean, typically you get back on Sunday night, late-ish, hopefully not too late, and then back into work at the shop Monday morning, and you got maybe a couple hours of kind of post-mortem analysis on the weekend that just passed, and you're into next week's cars and kind of doing the final QC check and seeing where we're at, car build wise, and, doing any updates that came about from the weekends past, some would be a rule change or something like that you gotta update for the next week. You're kind of focused on that and then digging into, setup stuff and prep for the next week. And you're really, you're kind of, you've worked a bit out in time, time frame of that, but now you're into the details and the final, kind of the final push. So you kind of, for us here, we load Tuesday nights most weeks. So, Tuesdays are the busy day because typically the truck will get back Monday afternoon, Monday night from the previous weekend. And you got one day to kind of turn the truck around and unload and restock and, get next week's cars done and loaded up. So Tuesdays are our busy day around here. And then, kind of Wednesdays are just working, simulation wise and, going through kind of where you're going to be setup wise and any updates that, that are coming for next week's cars. You're kind of trying to get ahead on that and kind of try and stay home somewhat on Wednesdays. Doesn't really work most days, but sometimes you get, some time off on Wednesdays. And then Thursday morning is a good time for me. That's kind of when I, use it to kind of reel in everything, from the week and, kind of get our, more detailed plan together for what we're going to do that weekend. And then, we'll fly out on a Tuesday afternoon. And, good thing about being on the West Coast, you get plenty of hours to work on the plane, but, kind of use that time to get there. And then Friday morning, you're at the track ready to go.
You said Tuesday afternoon. Did you mean Thursday? You fly out Thursday typically?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Thursday afternoons. Yeah.
How do you manage it with your family, Cole? Because I get the sense that they're really, really important to you. How do you guys work through that?
It's a challenge. I'm fortunate, my wife and I have a great relationship, and, we're each other's best friends, so we're able to work through it pretty well. But, it's a challenge. I feel, probably the thing that will eventually, lead me away from doing this is that, that kind of loss on the family time side of things. But, it's tough. I mean, you especially notice even in the off season, we're busy, but, just being home every night, the difference it makes, and, your kids knowing you're there to count on you. It's funny, my kids are 4 and 2, and I remember the days of them crying and, my wife having to tear them out of my arms when I'm leaving to go to the airport. And then it gets to the point where they don't even care that you go. It's like, all right, yeah, see you, Dad. So I'm not sure which hurts worse, but it's a tough thing to do every week for sure. I've been fortunate the last couple of years to be able to bring them, once every few weeks or something like that. They'll come on the road with us, but even that's hard. I mean, they work long days at the track and don't get to see them a lot. So it's, it's tough on them traveling as well. So it's a tough balance for sure.
You're still a pretty young guy, Cole, and you've accomplished a lot in that time so far. What do you think about, it doesn't sound like there's a lot of time built into your schedule for daydreaming or anything like that, but what are some of the things that maybe you think someday I might like to try and do this or experience that? Doesn't have to necessarily be professional either, but just some stuff that you think might be up ahead of you someday.
It's hard to say. I mean, I think, I got a big passion for the outdoors and, that side of things and doing stuff with my kids and stuff. So I think, hopefully when this is all said and done or calms down, I got more time to be able to do that and keep myself in good shape and, good state of mind and, hopefully be around for a lot of the good years of my kid's life before they don't want to listen to you anymore.
Yeah, well, I'm approaching that time myself, Cole. But...
I keep saying it's coming, so I'm just gonna everything else I've been told's turned out to be true, so we'll just I'm gonna believe it.
Cole, before I let you go, what's the craziest thing that's happened at one of these races at Crew Chief, and how'd you handle it?
Oh man, I don't know. I feel like something crazy happens every week. It's funny. You kind of spend every week recouping and getting your temper and calm, and and then you can be at the track 15 minutes on a Friday morning dealing with NASCAR, and it'll have your blood boiling so bad it's ridiculous. So it's that's probably the frustrating thing is dealing with that side of the sport for sure.
Well, those are among the things that you can't control, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Want to keep it positive, so I haven't mentioned a couple of those run-ins, but suffice it to say that you guys have overcome all the challenges that have been thrown at you over the last couple of years. And the thing about these podcasts, Cole, is that we're recording this several weeks before you go to Daytona in 2017, but for all we know, somebody may be hearing this a couple seasons later. Maybe you've got a couple championships under your belt by then. You never know, so that's why I haven't been too specific with the date. But to this point, it's just been an absolute pleasure to watch your career progress, and it's not even proud of you, although everybody that has been associated with you in one form or another and has had anything to do with Delaware Speedway and CASCAR and all those organizations that were part of your, I'll call them formative years, everybody certainly is proud of you. But just, I think I speak for them too, Cole, when I just say I'm just really happy for you. And all of the photos that I see and the things that you share about in the time that you do have with your wife and your wonderful 2 kids, and when you are enjoying successes with the Furniture Row Racing team, I feel happy. And I know that the people that are around in the circles that you and I share from that time in our lives, they're happy too. And I hope that you know that, and I hope that you can carry that with you and take that forward through those travels and that relentless grind. Is that I think it's an amazing thing just by doing what you do, being who you are, and putting your energy into something that kind of feeds your soul and who you think you are at your essence, which is, it sounds to me like what you fed way back when you decided to ditch the job at Toyota and then go and sleep on your buddy's couch and eventually hook on at Childress Racing. And now here you are doing what you're doing, and you've got a lot of people that it brings a lot of happiness to them. And I want to congratulate you for that, and I hope that you don't forget that.
I appreciate it, Kevin. That means a lot.
Cole, thanks so much for making the time. It's great to catch up, and I wish you all the best in the coming seasons.
Awesome. Thanks, Kevin.
You can follow along with Cole on Twitter at Cole Pearn. I'll spell his name for you. His first name is C-O-L-E. Last name is P-E-A-R-N. C-O-L-E-P-E-A-R-N. At Cole Pearn on Twitter. And Cole, thanks again for your time for this, and best of luck this year and in the coming seasons and all the next parts of your journey. We certainly wish you well. You can reach me at kevinbulmer.com. NoScheduleMan.com will take you to the same place. All my social media channel links are up there on the upper right-hand corner, as is the sign-up for our email VIP list. I hope you'll join me on this journey, and I certainly would love to hear from you. Thanks for listening. I hope to have you here next week when we explore another journey on the No Schedule Man podcast.
Just a little deja vu.